Hello, and welcome to our Energy Connect studio at Gastech 2023. I'm delighted to have sitting with me once again, Mark Brownstein, Senior Vice President, Energy Transition at the Environment Defence Fund, EDF. Mark, really good to see you again.
Good to see you. It's good to be here.
Now, to kick things off, industry and some governments appear to be moving on climate, but will the momentum hold? And we've got winter coming up where potential fuel shortages could come in again. So how much of an impact are geopolitical unknowns that could play a factor in here on hampering climate movement?
Well, there's no question that geopolitics has rolled energy markets and has caused a lot of hardship for people around the world. War is not good for anybody, anytime. It's certainly not good for energy markets or energy costs. I think we've seen that very clearly. Candidly, it's not good for the environment either. For as much attention has been paid to energy markets and the effect of war on energy markets, the other big news item of this year has been the amount of floods and fires and weather disturbances, unprecedented, almost biblical, right? That has been really affecting every part of the globe. So concerns about energy security and energy supply are bearing down on policymakers around the world. Concerns about climate and climate security and climate stability are equally bearing down on all of us. And I think that is the twin challenge that we have here at Gastech, and in the months to come.
Yes, we've all saw the varying climate disasters around the world, as you said. And what about industry's response? The energy industry's response to climate. Are companies doing enough?
Well, it's very instructive. I've been coming to this conference and conferences like it for a number of years. One of the things that has changed over the years is how many of the companies here are marketing themselves and marketing their products as enabling the energy transition. And that's true whether you're a large oil and gas company or you're a large supplier to the oil and gas company. Every one of these booths here talk about energy transition and the role that they play in the energy transition. So the marketing is fantastic. What's less clear is actually what is the track record of accomplishment. Are we in fact seeing major new capital going into clean energy technologies? Are we in fact seeing emissions of carbon dioxide and methane come down? That is really the measure of how well the industry is doing in matching, deeds to words.
Absolutely, Mark. And are you seeing a reduction in methane? I mean, we've definitely seen a bit more in the news. I've seen more, about satellites helping reduce methane emissions from oil and gas companies. And I know that was quite a big focus at ADIPEC last year. Different companies who had satellite technology to help reduce methane. So,
and not just companies, right? Environmental Defense Fund in the first quarter of 2024 will be launching our satellite, which will provide methane emissions data on more than 80% of all oil and gas operations worldwide. And we believe that this information is going to be incredibly important to not only highlighting the magnitude of the challenge, but also giving companies and countries and investors the information they need to know where the problems are and how to get after them. And importantly, and this goes to the point we were just talking about, this information will also be a way in which to track progress. So we won't have to take a company's CEO at his or her word. We'll have the data. And that data will be available to everybody. So, full transparency. And in the same way that reporting financial data helps discipline a company to deliver performance, we believe that providing environmental data will discipline companies to provide environmental performance. So we think it's going to be a game changer.
Now, Mark, we're here in September. COP28 in Dubai is fast approaching.
Yeah.
There's ADIPEC in between. We've seen in discourse environmental leaders, like Al Gore, but others, have been quite heavily criticising the oil and gas industry's involvement in COP28. What's your, viewpoint of this? But also, what do you think the energy industry can do to sort of change this negative section in the public discourse?
Well, COP28 is significant for at least two reasons. The first is that this is the opportunity that the world does what's called a global stock take. It is a look at what has happened since the Paris Agreement was signed in 2015. Are countries really following through on the commitments that they've made? And how close are we to reducing emissions consistent with achieving climate stability? I think the bad news there is that the stock take will show is that we're way off track. And Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, who's the president of COP28, has said as much, right? And he's concerned about this. Now, of course, that introduces the second significant point about COP28. COP28 is being held in the United Arab Emirates. It's being chaired by Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, who is himself the CEO of a major oil company. But it's also fair to say he's also been the chairman of the world's largest investor in renewables. So he's a man that understands energy issues quite well. But it's fair to say that this is really going to be a climate COP, but also an energy COP. And that the world's oil and gas industry is very much going to be, front and center. Now, that is both a challenge, but it is also an opportunity. So everyone in this room at this conference says that they want to be a constructive part of the energy transition. It really depends on what they bring to COP28. What kind of tangible commitments, what kind of investment strategies. On the issue of methane, will the industry embrace stringent methane targets, transparent reporting, and will they embrace a real schedule for making reductions? These are the things that we'll be looking for when the world gets together at the COP in the beginning of December. And I hope, candidly, that the ADIPEC conference coming up in October is an opportunity for national oil companies, international oil companies to get together and really come up with that tangible strategy that maybe can help change a little bit of the conversation.
That's really good to hear, Mark. Yes, and in the next couple of weeks, let's see what happens at ADIPEC. And just before we go, we sat down last Gastech in Milan.
Yeah.
I know you said about your satellite, but what else have you been up to in the last year? What's some of the highlights, and how busy have you been at EDF?
Well, I've been very busy, and I will confess that my carbon footprint has grown because I am very much flying around the world, engaging with policymakers, engaging with oil and gas companies around the world in an effort to try to prod constructive action. I want to make sure that as I continue to fly around the world and do business, that the fuel that's fueling my airplane is green fuel, is fuel that's derived from something other than fossil fuels. The technologies are there to do that. And it's really just a question of whether or not we can ramp up the capacity for that in time to make a real difference for the climate. And again, that's what I think the opportunity is in front of the industry. Much of the technologies are there. Now it's the question about scaling them up and the level of investment required to scale them up and the level of commitment to do it.
Very interesting points there, Mark. And just before we go, mention what Gastech in Singapore, and these shows move around the world, but what's the importance of having a show like this, which also has a big climate tech and a hydrogen component to it, here in Asia?
Well, Singapore is a great place to be having these conversations. Not only is it the world's largest, bunkering hub for the aviation fuels and the shipping fuels that I just talked about, but it's a country that has sort of green at its core. Right? You can't when you spend any amount of time in the city, you can't help but notice how green it is. It is perhaps a hopeful sign that even in the midst of a growing economy here in Asia, that there are ways to marry economic prosperity and environmental stewardship. I come to a place like Singapore, and I walk away with a certain amount of optimism that we can do this. As any Singaporean will tell you, it takes the will to grow, and grow in the right ways.
Very interesting, Mark. Just want to thank you for coming down to the Energy Connect studio, and I'm sure I'll see you at ADIPEC and obviously COP as well.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for watching, and I look forward to bringing you more studio interviews from the show floor in the coming days.